Welcome back. It's a two-part conversation for us on the program today. First up is security. What changed that the Inspector General of Police is saying that Nigeria is not mature for state police? And the latest call by African leaders for some form of a standby force to counter terrorism across the region. That's the first part of our conversation. When we're done with that, we'll explore what's going on in Rivers State. There's been a back and forth since the administration of Governor Siminala Ifubara. They're back in the news. The latest is the veto by the State House of Assembly. We'll explore that as well. But let's begin the first part of the conversation that has to do with security. We're being joined in the program by Professor Jideofor Abide. He's a professor of international relations and political science, Nasarawa State University. Joins us from Abuja studio. Prof, thank you for coming on the program.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Well, sir, joining us, Professor Jiman La is the head of Department History and International Studies, University of Jos. I understand he's going to join us in just a moment. As soon as he joins us, we'll get to that conversation. Prof, let me come to you. Let's begin from home before we get to the continental conversation, especially with what happened at the office of the NSA today. But let's begin locally with the issue that has to do with state police. In mid-February, the president and the 36 governors, they agreed that I think it's time for Nigeria to have state police. In fact, a committee was set up to look into all of this. And we're barely 2 months into that conversation. And this is the latest coming from the IGP that Nigeria is not mature. Those were the words from the representative who spoke on his behalf for state police. Is this an issue of discordant tone? What is going on here?
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I think it's important for us to have a context to what the IGP said. The House of Representatives Constitution Review Committee, was holding a dialogue on state police. You do recognize that the issue of state police is on the exclusive legislative list, which means for that to be implemented, there has to be an amendment, I think, on Section 214 of the Constitution for that, to come to fruition. So I think what they were trying to do, the House of Representatives, the Constitution Amendment Committee, was to get the views of Nigerians. And realistically speaking, while I do not agree with the IGP, no one should also expect them to commit what you can call corporate class suicide. The whole idea of state police will also mean, slimming down their powers. And that is why, in fact, during their, when the AIG that presented him, he said they would rather prefer that the Federal Road Safety Corps and the Civil Defense Commission they should be merged as departments within the police. It can be understood. And it's just an opinion. It's not that they are saying we cannot do that. Once the Constitution is amended, it becomes a fait accompli. However, the issue of amending the Constitution to bring that to pass is also not a tea party. It requires concurrent opinion of the National Assembly, that is the Senate and the House of Reps, in addition to a majority of the 36 states of the Federation, of the state houses of assembly of the Federation. So I don't see anything wrong in the fact that they stated their own views. And you are right. It seems to be something that is already settled. In fact, former President Jonathan did say today that the issue of state police is already a settled matter. In the 2014 Constitutional Conference, it was also recommended, multi-level policing was recommended, the state police, coastal guard, border guard, and rest. And in February, as you also rightly mentioned, the president, together with 36 governors of the Federation, also have agreed to the idea of state police. So what they said should not be like, that they are trying to go against the position of the president. No, I think you should even give them the kudos for having the boldness to express their opinion. They were invited to express their opinion, and they have expressed their opinion, and it's left for us to interrogate the opinions they express. And for people, I think we are nearing a consensus on the fact that despite the fears about state police, that it is now time for us to embrace it and learn how to deal with the problems that may arise from that.
Prof, the issue here is, for instance, since you're a professor in your own right. So if we're doing consultation and within this space, your forte, we will naturally come to you to say, Prof, what do you think about this thing? So is the IGP of police naturally, those are some of the people, key stakeholders that we should be speaking to as to how this should come about. So it's a bit disturbing for some people if I know you've looked at it half full, half empty, that they have the boldness to speak their mind. But on the other hand, since that is their forte and they appear to not be in tandem with the governors and all of the other people involved in this, that's where the concern is. I don't know whether you get where my drift is trying to go.
Yeah, I agree with you, but I'm saying that if you look at what is required, in February, the House of Representatives introduced a bill to amend that constitution, I think section 214. And the police has no role to play in that. What is important, for example, the governors have concurred, and we know that most of the governors control the state legislatures. So if the president already, who has a lot of influence over the governors, over the states' houses of assembly, if he is in favor, then it means that the position of the police is important, but is not decisive. As soon as the relevant section of the Constitution is amended, then this issue of state police comes into force. And the president, as the commander-in-chief, will simply give the instruction. And willy-nilly, the police will follow. You don't forget, for example, that the police, as we know them, they've always been against civil defense, road safety, and other forces, that they just want everything to be within the police department. That's understandable. That is corporate trying to protect your domain, your forte, your turf. And we don't really, realistically speaking, expect them to commit corporate class suicide. But it doesn't matter. They've spoken their mind. And in the marketplace of ideas that have ensued, you can also see how their voices are being drowned. And the argument they marshal three key arguments. One is that they argue that it will be abused by the state governors, which is usually the normal argument. Yeah, they will be. There's no money. They will not have enough funds. And there was a third one they came up with, which I can't remember. But these are the same fears we have about the federal government control certain central agencies or federal agencies like Independent National Electoral Commission, the police. We always suspect them of bias. And the whole idea of constitutional amendment of electoral laws, for example, has been to trying to find ways of protecting the body from influence of the federal government. So, when we start it, hopefully it will start. There will be challenges like every other thing in life. And people are already looking beyond the debate on whether it is desirable, to coming up with solutions on how some of the fears of state police, can be, managed. For example, people are talking about setting up state police commission, bringing in different elements and making the state police subject to that state police commission, and finding ways to whittling down the influence of the governors on the police. And, and some people are arguing that, we already have a form of state police, which is not correct. Vigilantes belong to community policing. The difference is that if you're a police, you're then legally allowed to carry certain grades of weapons.
Okay.
But in the whole conversation, of course, is also what is often lost is that once you have a state police, it's not going to be a magic bullet that will make all insecurity in the states disappear, because there are.
Yeah, my apologies, Prof. I want us to look at some of because there are two parts to the conversation: the issue of state police, and of course regional security. That the president was in attendance today. But I know you're citing Section 214 that says there shall be a police force for Nigeria, which shall be known as the Nigeria Police Force, and subject to the provisions of this section, no other police force shall be established for the Federation or any part thereof. So that's the part I guess you're citing that has to be amended for this to take effect. But let's look at some of the argument and posit it as appropriately, because he didn't just say it's not mature. Let's look at argument number one, or the way I enumerated them. He was saying that if we look at the issue of state police, it has the potential to be subject to abuse by political players. Is that not a valid argument?
It is. But that has also been the argument. If you use that argument of abuse, or that we are not mature, that raises the question of what is the metric for measuring maturity, and where are we on that spectrum to know when we get mature. You can apply the same argument to use it to forestall any kind of change. For example, during the struggle for independence, those who opposed political independence were also arguing that Nigeria was not politically mature for independence. When Obasanjo was playing with the idea of going to the moon, launching a satellite into the orbit, some people say Nigeria is also not mature. So you cannot wait until we are mature. Of course, we don't know the metric for measuring that maturity. But sometimes you take a bold step and then handle the fallouts. Every policy has unintended consequences. So once you launch any policy, you will be prepared. Of course, you do your scenario mapping and be prepared, to deal with the unintended consequences of any policy. It doesn't matter any policy you launch, there will be unintended consequences. And yes, it is a legitimate argument. We have seen that in the states, the governors are like emperors. And we have seen them, sometimes they go and pull down people's houses without, recourse to the law. They are very brazen, they are very monarchical, very imperial. But then, this is also an opportunity for us to start a conversation in that direction. You start it, we think of countervailing measures, one of which, for example, I mentioned, to have state police commission, and then get people that can be truly independent, say the religious people, get people in traditional institutions and make them to become members of the state police. There are several other ways we can't eliminate them, and then make sure that the tendency for the governors to, have overwhelming influence over the police, is curtailed. Don't forget that we have the same fear about the federal government and its agencies. We have the fear that the federal government controls the police and then we use it against the opponents. We have the fear that the federal government controls the electoral body and will manipulate it. That is what they call power of incumbency. And part of the constitutional, and the whole struggle by the civil society groups is also to find ways to make sure that the institutions that are created are independent of overbearing influence of actors like the governors or the presidency.
Bro, let me bring in Professor Jimam Allah, is a HOD of the Department of History and International Studies, University of Jos. Prof, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I needed your... before we get into the issue of continental and regional security, from what happened at the NSS office today, we're exploring this conversation around state police that the IGP, through his representative, has talked about the fact that Nigeria is not mature for it. I just needed your quick take on that before I ask this, follow-up question.
Yes, let me quickly say that I have stepped down as HOD. My term has ended, but thanks for the question. Well, I'm not surprised that the IGP made that statement. He's not the first IG to say so, and I can assure you he will not be the last. But I think importantly, it has again opened up the debate. The points which the IGP made about inadequate manpower, inadequate operational equipment, arms, ammunition, communication equipment, technology, forensics, drones, and training. Now, those are real challenges of the NPF. If they are not resolved, the police would want to make this argument, that resolve our challenges before you can start this mulling or thinking about state police. Unfortunately for the IGP, Jeffrey, the political train has left the station. From what we have witnessed with the state governors and the federal government, particularly that the statement that came out that the 36 governors expressed their support. I think the critical question we should be asking is that have these governors consulted with their people? To what extent would this state police be service to people, not again, as Prof said, going the way of our experiences with the First Republic? I think it's clear that we are going to have some form of state police in Nigeria, but the question is what type, what typology? Look at every federal state around the world. There is some system of devolution working, whether it's a centralized system in terms of control, funding, and the use of arms, or a semi-centralized system, or a semi-decentralized system, or an absolutely decentralized system. So it's about typology. It doesn't mean that it's going to be that absolutely decentralized system. We need to have that conversation. What best suits, what best fits our purpose, And let's not forget, while the police has not been decentralized, policing has been largely decentralized in Nigeria. When you look at the task forces across our states, those task forces, by and large, have been operating to a large extent as state police. So I think it's really about having this debate, opening the space for the people to also articulate in various critical forums what typology of state police are we talking about. But like I said, the political train has already left the station.
Let me come to you, Professor Gio, on this particular one. Let's move on now, so that I just look at the time. We do not have so much time on the state police issue because he complained about jurisdiction, conflict of jurisdiction, according to the IGP. But maybe you may touch on that. But in answering the next question, we've seen that the NSA said that trial of Boko Haram terrorists, begins in Kanje, and welcome development. How would you want this to be? Because people have always complained, the reason I'm asking this, people have always complained that the people that kill people, these terrorists, we hardly see them brought to justice. How do you suggest the NSA and those involved should approach this? Should we have some level of transparency in how this trial proceeds until we get to hear XYZ has been sentenced because he was found guilty? Because perhaps it's not the first time we're hearing that they're on trial, just to build confidence in Nigerians that terrorists are being tried and they face justice?
Well, thank you very much. That's a very important, has been an issue, in many countries where, you faced a kind of serious security. If you go to Ireland and other countries, what do you do with people that you are captured? And what do you do with people that call themselves repentant? There is always this resistance by the general populace to people, any form of trying to talk about reintegration of, former militants into the society. And there's all manner of conspiracy theories, whether they are being properly charged. We have heard stories about some of them escaping. So in the Nigerian context, where we have also had stories about top people being their sponsors. So people are not really convinced. There are also people who just believe that the best thing is just kill everyone. That's impossible. That's the point to be made. That is not possible to just, because they run into thousands, you can't just kill everybody. you have to find a way of convincing the people that really these people are being tried and that there are no kid gloves and that the whole thing is transparent. We've had so many contraptions on how to de-radicalize, several de-radicalization programs. And then some are tried, some are released and said, okay, we are now putting them into de-radicalization. And after de-radicalization, we'll then reintegrate them into society. The fears, it's what is concerned, people are worried about. And the victims, it is important that whatever is being done, you are not only focusing on the people you are trying, you also have to bear in mind the people that have been victims of the crimes that they are purported to have committed. Having said that, also in law, everybody is presumed innocent until found guilty. So that is the conundrum the state finds itself. How do we ensure that these people are tried? Because we are presuming them to be innocent. And that in the kind of system, modern systems, even if you catch somebody red-handed, it's still only the court, properly constituted, that can pronounce the person guilty. How do we do this? How do we ensure a skeptical public, where several conspiracy theories are flying around, that yes, we have given them, we've really put them on trial, and those that are convicted are genuinely convicted, and not that they are convicted today, a few days later they have escaped, or even if it's not reported that they've escaped, there are rumors that some have escaped. So these are skeptical publics. So there are several publics in this context that the state should be focusing on: the victims, the skeptical public, and even the taking into consideration the idea that, okay, we are going to give them fair trial, transparent trial, but fair trial. What is fair trial?
Let me come to you. Okay, both of you are Professor Ola. I wanted to go back to Professor Ola on this particular. The president has posited a few things when it comes to this conversation, and one of the things he said today at that particular forum when they were contemplating on how to counter terrorism is the fact that leaders must look at the root causes of the drivers of this terrorism. I know you had mentioned the issue of mining and how foreign money finances this mining activities for illegal mining and instability. But my question to you, sir, is, are the leaders of Africa doing enough to even reduce the drivers of terrorism before we can now begin to think of might and boots on ground to combat this issue?
I mean, in simple terms, Jeffrey, I would say no. There is a crisis of governance, and to just link this issue with our discussions on state police. When you look at the Nigerian state, for example, the major crisis of governance is not even at the federal level. The crisis of governance is at the state level. These state governors who are making claim to want to implement state police, look at items on the concurrent list: healthcare, education. How many states in Nigeria have managed them successfully? Part of the crisis in the collapse of public education at primary and secondary levels is because of state neglect. You know, President Buhari signed the correctional facility bill into law, mandating it to move from the exclusive to the concurrent list. How many states have put that process?
Prof, are you there? Hello, Prof. All right, Professor Adibe, maybe I'll bring it to you, but I'm going to add a question to this. I guess the internet is what is responsible that we can't get Professor La. But quickly, before we begin, as we begin to wind down, one of the things that was stated at that meeting today, where President of Togo, Ghana, and Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu was present, is that stand by force to deter current and future insurgency across the region. But given the level of weakness the regional body as well as the continental body has shown with the coup across the continent, especially the West African sub-region, do you think this is going to be anything to reckon with, even if it happens?
Well, theoretically, it is welcome. If you look at the argument of Niger, Gabon, and Mali, the three countries that decided to leave ECOWAS, part of the argument is that when they called on ECOWAS to help them with to fight the jihadists, ECOWAS was very feeble, was unable to do so. So theoretically, if you're able to have a standby force, maybe they will help augment the state efforts, efforts by countries that are affected like Cameroon, Nigeria, and Niger. But there are several obstacles to setting up a standby force. That's also the issue of money, funding, who funds it, the issue of, the contradiction, the issue of the division between the French-speaking, the English-speaking, and the fact that ECOWAS seem now to be a little wobbly, especially with the departure of the three countries. It is in theory, I would say theoretically, something to be looked into. It's not the first time the idea of African standby force. Kwame Nkrumah suggested it for Africa, when during the whole conversation that led to the setting up of Organization of African Unity, which later became the African Union. So it's been an idea, it's been a romantic idea that has been played over the years by radicals, but it has not been able to come into fruition. The closest I think we've come to having a standby force was ECOMOG, which was still not a standby force, but which did some work. Increasingly, after the last intervention, in Liberia, it's been difficult, in my own opinion, to assemble another force like ECOWAS, ECOMOG, that will intervene in some hotspot areas like fighting terrorism or conflicts. It's not been as easy as it was in earlier on, and there are several factors that are responsible for that. But to put it simply, the idea of a standby force has always been an idea romanticized by radical public intellectuals over the years.
Prof, I must thank you for your insight. There's a lot to talk about. Our safety is a concern to all of us. That's why this conversation is important. Whether it's happening at the national, sub-national, regional, or continental level. Professor Jide Ofoabide is the Professor of International Relations and Political Science, Nasarawa State University, who joined us from Abuja studio. Thanks, Prof, for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.